Hey Brian, back again. We'll have to make you part of the team.
Sounds good.
We owe you a t-shirt.
I'll get it in the mail.
So we're keen to do a bit of a comparison. You got two cars here that are very popular choices in the small car segment.
Yep.
Coming in at around the same price. The VW a little older.
Yep.
But perhaps a few more features, and then the Mazda3 a little newer. So we've also got Japan versus Germany, I guess. So let's kick off with styling. So you weren't fussed in terms of styling with either of those,
Yeah.
I gathered.
Yeah.
If you had to pick a winner, who would it be?
Probably the Golf. I think it just has that practical styling where it's not trying to add things for aesthetics that potentially make it look a bit bigger, or so I think it's just a very practical design.
Yeah, typical VW, I think. I'd almost call it a handsome, no-nonsense design. The Mazda, you got your flared wheel arches and that sort of thing, which is popular too. But,
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to pick, I'd probably go with the VW as well. Let's talk practicality. So they're both hatches. So I know you were keen on a hatch.
Yep.
You can open up the boot, of course, and you've got that space when you lay the seats down. Officially, the VW has more cargo room.
Yep.
A bit over 400 litres versus a bit over 300 for the Mazda. In everyday use, which one have you found more practical?
I think everyday use, they're probably very similar. The ease of putting the seats down is much the same. Although you've stated the size is slightly better for the Golf, I probably haven't noticed that difference at a practical level. One thing I have noticed, if I'm putting something on the roof, the extra height of the aerial and the Mazda does get in the way. And with the kayaks, I think the slightly curved roof makes it more likely that they'll bottom out when I tighten them down, whereas on the Golf, they sit a lot more level.
Absolutely, because you've got some roof racks that you tie up there, don't you?
Yeah, just the soft ones, they ratchet on. And I can get two kayaks on there. It takes a bit of time to make sure that it's all secure, but they've been on both. I'd say it's probably a little bit easier with the Golf.
Yeah, you can see it's noticeably flatter on the Golf roof compared to the Mazda3, which really tapers down at the end there. So yeah, you would get a more stable.
But that's probably a feature that not everyone really would look for in a car, but I suppose it is something to think about if you do want to put things on the roof.
So if you had to give one the tick of approval, which one would it be?
I'll admit my bias. I drive the Golf on a daily basis, and I do feel more comfortable with that.
All right, let's move on to the engine, the power plant.
Yep.
So 2-litre turbo diesel in the VW, 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol in the Mazda. So like chalk and cheese, really. In terms of economy, you've mentioned the VW incredibly good.
Yep.
Between 3 and high 4s, depending on whether you're doing urban or highway. And then the Mazda3 nudging 7.
Yeah, I'll probably correct you there. If I'm doing a lot of urban driving, the Golf, particularly for the first part of the journey, I think it does churn through a bit more, so it might sit in the 6 sort of 7 mark. But the minute it goes on the highway, that settles down really quickly. So weekend drive, or if you're going to the shops, etc., I think they would be comparable. Possibly the Mazda would be a bit more efficient in that regard.
Sure.
But yeah, the minute you're on the highway, the Golf wins out in efficiency.
Who do you give the performance edge to?
I think that one's pretty easy towards the Golf. It's just got that significantly more power, and the dual clutch gearbox makes a significant difference in the smoothness of those shifts.
Yeah, it is a fair bit quicker, certainly off the mark and accelerating through the mid-range. Do you have any issues with the DSG, changing from forward to reverse or in and around the car park? Some people do have complaints sometimes.
I did read that when I purchased it, that some people had some concerns. They thought it was a bit jerky, or that there's a risk of it taking off on them. I've not experienced that, so I suppose having read that and then having driven it, I wouldn't really consider that to be a concern at all.
Okay, so you'd give the engine and gearbox combination hands down to the VW.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's talk about the interior. In terms of features, would you give the edge to either of those?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at the seats and that sort of thing, I think the seats of the Golf are a little bit softer. That could just be the age of them. It could be slightly different materials. But the durability, I think, is possibly the edge to the Mazda. It is a younger car, but the roof ceiling is still intact. So it gets a few points there. In terms of the electronics, I suppose the main thing we use is the cruise control and the Bluetooth. The cruise control is very similar between both of them. Neither of them have any of the more modern technology like slowing down automatically and
The safety aids.
yeah, none of those safety aids. But I suppose that just makes you stay alert when you're driving and makes you pay attention.
To their credit, I think they both got 5-star ratings, you know, back in their day. They wouldn't achieve that now, but they did at the time.
Yeah, I don't feel unsafe in either of them.
Yep. Comfort, noise levels?
Comfort and noise levels, I haven't really noticed a significance. I'd put them on par with each other. You might say the diesel's possibly a bit noisier or you get that slightly different rev sound, but neither of them jumps out and says I'm too noisy at a practical level.
Okay, what about running costs? So we mentioned earlier, German cars, typically most people feel they're going to cost you more in the long run.
Yep.
In your experience?
I would say they're fairly on par, possibly a bit more with the Golf, but I would attribute that to its age rather than it being European. The mechanic we go to charges by the hour. He doesn't charge by the brand. So then you're looking at parts, and I suppose most of your oil, etc., is very much compatible. When we've had to replace parts like disc brakes, etc., we can get aftermarket parts at a reasonable price, so I haven't noticed a significant sting.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So pretty well on par in terms of running costs as well.
Yeah, I feel so. There's been no issues where we've been waiting months for a part to come from Europe. Everything seems to be pretty available at Super Cheap Auto or any of those sort of local places.
So the Mazda, you haven't had any items needing repairing. The VW did have the radiator,
yep,
but then it has done significantly more.
Yeah, kilometres. Yeah, many more kilometres.
Yeah, any interior features that stand out above the other one?
So yeah, probably the other interior is looking at the Bluetooth and the phone connectivity. It's important, obviously, to have a phone that connects wirelessly so that if you do need to make a call, you're operating within the law and safety guidelines. To set up the Golf is very easy. I think it's a slightly higher tech. You've got a digital screen, you can read all the text and you just connect it up and you can sync your phone book, etc. From there, you just use the buttons on the steering wheel to make a call, choose a number from your phone book, etc. With the Mazda, it's probably a slightly lower tech version where you have to program in favorite numbers and train it to recognize your voice or a command to dial that. So if my wife jumps in my car, she can hook her phone up and make calls straight away. If I'm in her car, I basically make sure I'm not making calls while I'm driving because I haven't taken that extra step to set it up.
So a tick to the Golf in terms of connectivity.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Value for money. So you thinking back to the purchase, paid a little bit more for the Mazda, around 17 versus around 15. Which one has delivered more so on the value for money equation?
Yeah, I think they've both delivered on the value for money. What we have with the Mazda is a younger car that is potentially that little bit more reliable. I don't have that same anticipation that maybe something will go due to age. That being said, we've only really had that experience with the radiator with the Golf. Beyond that, it's gone really well as well. So I think if you're doing lots of highway driving or travelling long distances, I'd definitely recommend looking at a diesel option just for that efficiency. The fact you can go 1,000 Ks between fill-ups, it's what, $60 to fill up a tank, $70 if it's an expensive time of the year. There's that value there.
So if you had your purchasing decision all over again, which one would you, or if someone else, I guess, was wanting to purchase either of these, which one would you recommend?
Yeah, I think I'd probably recommend, well, depends on what you're after, but if you're a bit like me, I suppose I'd recommend the Golf. I just think it has those few extra features, keeping in mind we're comparing a base model Mazda versus possibly a more higher model of the Golf.
And your individual ratings were 8 for the Golf, 7.5 for the Mazda. You still happy with those?
Yeah, I think possibly I've been a bit harsh on the Golf, but I think it's not perfect, but a lot of that is inherent in the design of a hatchback. We don't have the roof racks, we don't have the tow bar, some of those things that would be nice to have, some of those extra safety features. So I suppose if you'd asked me at the time, if I bought it brand new, I think it would have been higher. It's showing its age a little bit, and it's not keeping up with some of those other features, but I see them as more of a bonus, and to do the job we want it to do, it does that quite well.
All right. And do you know if your wife has any preference? You know, she's driven both of them for a few years now. Which one would she pick?
I think she'd probably pick the Golf now. She initially had that preference for the Mazda, or did want to look at the Mazda. I know she's keen on, if we did upgrade, to get another Volkswagen or similar, just for those benefits that we've talked about.
Great, all right, I reckon that's probably a win to the Golf then. But with the Mazda not too far behind.
No, I think they're both great cars, and I'd probably look at if you're looking in that second-hand market, I'd be going on price as a bit of a decider.
Whatever you can find a better deal with.
Yeah, because obviously you're subject to what's available. And
yeah. All right, Brian, thanks again. I think that's been extremely helpful. You know, you got two very popular choices there, and they both sound like solid choices as well. So thanks again for your time.
No problem. Thanks, John.
Cheers.